Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and today we are talking about collaboration. Now, before you turn off this podcast because you're like, Emmy, I know how to define collaboration. No. This goes deep into the heart of what it means to be a collaborator. I'm sitting down with Dr. Benson, and we talk about the heart of collaboration and what to do to get the most out of an authentic and real collaboration. And then at the end, we offer advice and tips if you're in a work situation or anything else that you feel could be more collaborative. And Dr. Benson offers great tips and techniques for how you can encourage and be your best self in the midst of those situations. He leaves you with one of the most amazing quotes at the end in our moment that matters. And I am sincerely excited for you to hear today's episode. I've known Dr. Benson since 2008 when we started grad school together. I was a master's student and he was a doctoral student. And so to bring you someone that I think so highly of to the show really means a lot. Thank you for listening. As always, the Music Ed Matters podcast is brought to you by our sponsor and friends at the Kinnison Choral Company. Their comprehensive rehearsal tracks will ensure that your singers are able to rehearse effectively from home with the sounds of real voices. And they're giving you a very special offer just for listening to our podcast. Go to www.kinnisonchoralco.com and use the coupon code MUSICMATTERS at checkout for 20% off your first order from their library. If you don't know Charlie and Carrie Kinnison, you are destined to love them. They are wonderful people, and I am so thankful for their support on the show. All right, back to it. I now present to you Collaboration and Collegiality with my friend, Dr. Benson. All right, today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we welcome one of my dear friends, Dr. Benson. Hello.
Hi, Emmy. It's great to be here with you.
It's great to see you. I've known you for 11 years, 12 years, 13 maybe.
2010 probably, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So 08 to 10. When were you at Florida State?
I was there from, 08 to 2011, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because we were first years together. And I remember you were like one of the really, really fancy ones that had gigs. And we kind of all worshipped the ground you walked on as master students. And you were so good in all the choirs. Like your rehearsals were fabulous. Anyway, it's great to talk to you.
I'll pay you off later for saying all the next things.
Wait, I hadn't seen you for a while because you went West Coast. You're out in California.
I am, yeah. I'm in San Jose, just about an hour south of San Francisco at San Jose State.
That's beautiful. And your weather must be gorgeous right now.
Yesterday we had it was like 74 degrees. It was amazing.
It's
a little cooler today, but winter in California is not so bad.
That sounds amazing. How long have you been at San Jose?
This is year 10. I started here in 2011. Yeah.
Wow. I know we've talked about how much the position has grown. You're the DCA and you have some more team. You're not the only choral person, which is awesome. You grew that position.
Yeah, we have two of us who are sort of full-time choral. Dr. Corey Brown came to us 2 years ago now, and she heads up the choral music education area and conducts our concert choir and our treble choir, and she's just an awesome colleague to have as well. So I'm excited to be at this place and being at. We are now according to Money Magazine, oddly, we are the #1 most transformative university in the country. And I think a lot of that has to do with how amazingly diverse we are and the ability of a big public university like us. We're just able to provide, students from all socioeconomic levels and all backgrounds and all gender identities and races and everything, opportunities to sort of climb up the ladder and get great jobs. I mean, we're also in the heart of Silicon Valley. So, lots of, obviously engineering and computer science are huge at San Jose State, understandably.
That's wonderful. I'm going to ask you another question, but I remember, I think I've been to CASMAC What does CASMAC stand for? California?
Yeah. California All-State Music Educators Conference.
Yes, it's big. I knew that was a lot of things I wasn't going to
It's
get
a
accurate.
mouthful.
It's a mouthful. I've presented there, I think, 4 times.
Yeah.
And the first time I went looking for your university, like looking for the table, and I couldn't find it. It was when it was in a different city. But it's been in Fresno for 3 years, and I think it was year 2. I found a bunch of your students and we took selfies together because I was telling them how I knew you and they just thought you were the be all end all. It was adorable to hear how excited they were that I knew who you were and that you were like recognizable. It was
Oh,
really
that's really
cool.
sweet. Yeah.
They
Well,
were
I
good
can't wait to
kids.
have you back in California after this pandemic is
I
over.
know. I love California. It's usually isn't Kazmak normally in about February?
It is. Yeah. It's usually right around President's Day weekend, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I remember that was one of my last trips before everything shut down, and it was beautiful as always. I love coming out to California. You're president of something out there.
I am. Yeah. I'm the current president of the California Choral Directors Association, sort of
Wonderful.
we're the affiliate organization for ACDA.
That is so great. And you did a lot of this summer virtual. I saw conferences and lots of great things coming out. How did you address all of these things shutting down? What did you guys do? Did the board get together and make ideas, or how did you collaborate and get some of those things started?
Yeah, thanks for asking. The one of the things that we're really proud of is, we were one of the first organizations in the country to start doing weekly webinars, and I kind of talked to the President's Council. We have a full board, and then the immediate past president, myself, and the president-elect kind of have our sort of a little subset governing body. And I reached out to them pretty early on in like the end of March and said, I think that we're going to need, I know I need support, and I know all of us need support, and I think we're going to need to create something virtually. And so we talked and we said, let's coordinate with the other CASMIC. Speaking of CASMIC, the other CASMIC organizations, the band, the orchestra, the Jazz Educators Associations, and CMEA, the MEA for California, and let's kind of figure out if they want to get involved. But we're going to do a CCDA weekly, and I think we started that in April, and we went all the way
Mm-hmm.
into June,
It
and
was long running.
it
It
was a
was
lot of
wonderful.
panel, like panel discussions. And I mean, there weren't, especially early on, we didn't have a lot of answers. It was a forum for people to talk and ask questions. And there were some great conversations around, virtual instruction, but then also after the murder of George Floyd, we really had some wonderful, amazing conversations about anti-racism and decolonizing our music curricula and our classrooms and our choral
Mm-hmm.
rehearsals. So.
These are so great. And I think the listener hearing some of these tidbits gives them a taste into what we're about to talk about, which we'll go there in a second. But give us a little bit more of your background. Before you went to Florida State, before you went to San Jose, what did you do? What's your education background?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area and went through sort of sang in choirs all through elementary, middle school, high school, and went off to New York City and had an amazing time living in New York. And I'm going to school at NYU and got my music education degree at NYU. Moved back to the D.C. area, taught for about 8 years in Arlington, Virginia, in the public schools there. And at an awesome school. It was a 6 through 12 school. So I was kind of my own feeder program. I got them
Mm-hmm.
in sixth grade. And so if they were good musicians and good readers by the time they graduated high school, it was my fault. And if they weren't, it was also my fault.
Yes.
So yeah, so it was a great time. And then along the way, I did a master's degree at Florida State. I was doing the summer master's during that 8-year period. And then after that, in 2008, I left and met you, Emmy, and
Yay.
moved to Tallahassee, Florida, full time, and started my PhD there. So, and then finished that and moved out here to California, and have been 10 years out here now, and can't believe it's already like
It's
that time
flown
flies.
by. It's
Yeah.
flown by. I can't believe it's been that long. All right, I'm very, very excited for our conversation today about what really matters to you and me and a lot of us. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, well, we were brainstorming, and one of our mutual friends and colleagues sort of got us fired up about the idea of collaboration, and how, as colleagues, we often throw out words like being collegial and collaboration as if it's like this easy thing to sort of just make happen. And
Right.
as you said in our little pre-chat before we started recording the podcast, as you said, I think a lot of us without thinking about collaboration, we just think that collaboration is just, calling somebody up on the phone and saying, let's do this project together. And the reality is it's much more complex than that. And what was the analogy you used about the dinner party?
Yeah, actually, one of the radio personalities in Savannah and I were talking about this. This is her analogy, but she said so often people are having a party and they say, yeah, you're going to bring the punch and you're going to bring the meatballs, and they never stop to ask, do you even need a party? What can I do to satiate you and to entertain you? And so really stopping and realizing a collaboration is not inviting people to support something that you already know you're going to do, but a real authentic collaboration is having a conversation, getting to know the other organization or the other person, and doing something that is mutually beneficial to both parties.
Well, and that's the key. Like, it's not a collaboration if both parties aren't benefiting in some way. Me asking you if your choir wants to join us on a concert where I conduct everything and you have to just teach your kids all the music, and like, yeah, that is a collaboration in sort of the most basic way, because yeah, your students are getting to perform with my students, and that can be great for both groups. But true collaboration should start, from a germinating seed that all parties are kind of organically or sort of forced to through multiple conversations. It doesn't always have to happen organically, but actual dialogue and in ways where all parties feel like they're really part of a team of mostly equals. I mean, that there probably has to be somebody who's the figurehead, the person in charge, the executive chef, if you will.
Yes.
But not everybody's just going to stand around and chop up onions, right? Like, I mean,
right.
If we're going to all contribute to the great meal, the sous chef,
or bring the paper goods.
Yeah.
I always hate when I get asked to bring paper goods to a party. Really, that's all I can contribute is napkins? You don't even want me to at least pick out my favorite kind of hummus? Like, come on.
Yeah, come on.
Well, I want to go back to this collaboration and the idea of organizations collaborating, but I love what you said when we were talking. Collaboration also happens within our work environments and within our teams. Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the frustrating things for many of us, and actually part of this conversation started because a mutual friend of Emmy's and mine, we were all chatting, and there is a frustration when you're not the boss person, when you're not that executive chef, and you feel like you've got expertise to offer. And maybe this is somebody that you work with regularly who really does mean well, but they don't necessarily make you feel like you're a part of the team, and that what your ideas are matter, and what your ideas are can be a part of the conversation. And so, with the people that we regularly work, it's so absolutely critical. For me as the director of choral activities, it's my job to not just make decisions and sort of tell my colleague this is how it's going, but to bring her in and to ask her, what do we want to do? What's our mission for this semester or this year? Are we wanting to travel? Are we wanting to do combined pieces? What do you want to bring to the table? And really listening.
Yes.
I think many of us as conductors and teachers are bad listeners. I have my best friend is an air traffic controller, and
I've heard that's one of the most stressful jobs.
It is extremely stressful, and he is fantastic at it. And one of the things that makes him fantastic at it is because he does have to listen a lot. I mean, you are telling planes, you're up in the control tower and you're telling planes what to do and where and when, but you're also listening and watching with your eyes and listening on the headset to what's happening. And he teases us because he hangs out with me and several of my other friends are, of course, teachers as well. And he teases us constantly because he says, I to you all when I'm teaching a new game, I have to explain things to you all so many times because you're all teachers and you don't listen. You're just used to giving instructions. And he's right. Like, he's teasing us, but he is absolutely right, because we sometimes are just so used to saying, here's how it's done, students, do it this way, do it my way. And that, as we're learning, is a power structure that is often not conducive for our learners. And it's certainly not conducive to collaboration. My colleagues and I want to feel like we're part of a team where our input and our own everybody brings their own expertise our own expertise is like, yes, okay, I'm going to listen to that and I'm going to bring that to the table too.
Right. It's like the executive chef being willing to try a new seasoning or a new way of cooking something. That could be wild. I actually was just having a conversation with a teacher. She's in her second week of teaching, which is amazing.
Wow.
Right? There's an
What a
episode
time.
coming on it. I know. So we have an episode coming down the road that we've been working on, just questions of a first-time teacher. And we were having, how do you get the buy-in? And one of my favorite ways to get buy-in, especially from middle schoolers or when you're with a group of high schoolers that have had the same teacher for a long time, is to present your expectations but have them define them and work collaboratively to define them. And you present options for consequences, but let them define what exactly is the sequence of consequences and why.
I love that. And then they
It's one
take
of my
ownership
favorite
over.
things. Yes. And
Yeah.
they start to, like, they actually help reinforce it. Same with, okay, so you don't like my music. That's what she's dealing with. They don't want to do her music. So bargaining, okay, we'll do my one song, but then you're going to work in this small group and teach everyone in your group your favorite song. And then I'll come around and you'll teach me. And if you're good enough, you'll teach the whole class as a sequence of events of building in the collaboration of the students.
That's fantastic. And they then feel the ownership of, we did this from the ground. They really feel like they've done it from the ground up. It's really their idea. Even if you've planted the initial seed, they feel like it's their
They
project.
took it and watered it. And the
Yeah.
same is true if that's the same for middle school, high schoolers, even the little people. They love to feel like they picked or like choose your own ending books. Oh my gosh, those are the bomb.
They are. They stress
So
me out
just a little,
because
because of who
because
you
I
are.
want to know, well, what if I had chosen option B instead of option A? So I will be honest, they stress me out, but I think that's what's so scary about collaboration. I think for all of us, those, as choir directors, we tend to be, and music teachers, we tend to be a little bit control freaky, and
Just
that's
a
okay.
smidge.
That's that's good, right? But like with everything, it can be both. It's the double-sided coin. It's both asset and liability, where if we if we let go of some of that control and we let our students, our fellow collaborators, our colleagues who are working with daily, and also our colleagues who maybe we want to call and say, hey, I'm thinking about this possible future project where we would combine our choirs, or what do you think? What would you want to do? And even if as a leader, even if you already have an idea that is mostly fully formed,
Mm-hmm.
there's a way to bring that to a colleague to say, hey, I'm thinking I want to do some kind of collaboration. What do you think? What kinds of pieces? Literally posing it as a question can be such a simple way
Right.
to bring somebody in, as opposed to saying, here's an idea I had, and let me tell you every aspect of how I've already thought it through. That
Yes.
doesn't, it's messier. It takes longer. It's kind of like democracy, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy for one person to just make the decision, and it takes a lot less time. Democracy takes time to really, for all sides to sort of duke out the end result. But
Mm-hmm.
in the end, it's there's some Winston Churchill quote about something about democracy being the best of all the worst choices.
Right.
I'm
But
messing up the quote, but it's
I'll
the
find it
best
and put
option
it
of
in the
all the bad
notes.
ones.
Yes, but I love that there's so much we can look at from a teaching perspective with our students, but then you tell a great concept of collaborating at the professional level. So we were talking about the college job sequence and how so often when you're applying at the entry level, you're getting all the entry level classes. There's no actual collaboration. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I look at it, and I get it, we sort of create this hierarchy, and certainly in higher education. I think it's the same in public schools. I noticed this, probably not as much for us as choir people, but I noticed this when I was teaching high school also. The first year teacher of English
Mm-hmm.
at a high school is probably most likely taking the English 9 classes, the ninth
Mm-hmm.
grade, and maybe they would get like one little English 10 class. And the teacher that's been there 25 years gets to teach AP English 12 literature and AP English 11, or or the
Mm-hmm.
advanced literature course. And so then we create this hierarchy as if like English ninth grade, English 9 is not a great class to have, which is so silly. But it this hierarchy, I think, is even more exacerbated or more exaggerated rather in higher ed, where, if I'm hiring, not just if, 2 years ago when we created the new position for a choral music education professor at San Jose State, I had kind of been doing everything, and I oversaw 5 choirs and taught both the conducting sequence and the choral methods, that sort of that senior year choral methods class for music educators. And when my boss, the director of the School of Music and Dance, said, Jeffrey, what do you want this new professor to have on their sort of teaching load? I said, well, for sure, they need to have an auditioned choir. I don't need to conduct both auditioned choirs. I love teaching them both, and I'm going to be sad to give up one of them, but they need to have an auditioned choir. And they also need to probably have that advanced sort of choral methods senior level class. It was, as Judy Bowers from Florida State used to call it, it's the boutique class. It's the class that everybody wants. I loved teaching it. It was one of my favorite classes. I also love teaching conducting. And I thought, well, I have to give up one of those two so that this person, I mean, I don't have to, but it's the right thing to do. And yeah, maybe we'll get somebody who will come and accept this position if they don't have those classes, but they're not going to stay for very long, right?
And I think that's key.
Yeah, I wanted somebody to come to San Jose State who wants to be a collaborator with me and who's going to stay. There's no guarantee, but that they would want to stay for a while because they've got classes at all levels, at all spectrum, sort of the full spectrum. And you and I both, chatting with you earlier, we learned this from, we sort of learned this on our own too, but I think I first heard it from Judy Bowers at Florida State of, when she came to Florida State I think in 1990, maybe,
It was
early 90s for sure. Yeah. 1990, she, Andre Thomas was already there, and Dr. Thomas didn't have to give, he was the director of choral activities. He could have sort of rearranged classes however he wanted. And she, said, yeah, I would have probably taken the job because I was a junior faculty member and just wanted a good job. But she said many of the reasons I stayed was because Andre is a great collaborator and wanted her to be a collaborator with him. And that he made sure that she had not just the non-auditioned treble choir, I think it's still called the FSU Women's Glee Club, but also, that sort of advanced, graduate level choral rehearsal techniques and that senior year music ed class. And she then stayed until, 2016, 2000, I can't remember. It's recent, but.
Right. And I think that's so important too. If you flip it and look, we're talking higher ed, but the same is true at a high school, middle school situation. Let's say maybe there's a department chair or a music coordinator or a fine arts coordinator, or maybe there's a lead teacher. How are you serving as both leader and facilitator and making everyone's voice heard, everyone's seasoning, if we go back to that analogy? And I think too, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, just you said something about serving, this idea of, one of the things that I think we often forget is that really, truly being servant leaders, that our job is, as in leadership, is to serve the people. And, I think of that as a musician, as a teacher, as a, in our democracy, that, and as in my role currently as president of the California Choral Directors Association, I'm elected to serve my constituents and to really create programs and scholarship opportunities and conferences that are representative of what we all need. And it's not my job to just sort of make decisions and right. Some of that is inherent in the job, but in all of this, our job is to be servant leaders. And I think that the best musicians and conductors, kind of keep their ego in check a little bit and think about that service part of our profession.
Let's talk about that ego for a second, because my question, sometimes you get in these situations and it's not necessarily that collaboration isn't happening, but I think there's a combination of imposter syndrome or egos that haven't been checked, or fear. Working with college seniors, what happens if the college senior has a better idea than me? We all learn.
Which happens, right?
All the time. I mean, these seniors are genius, especially in the grad students that come in. I'm just always so thankful when I get an intern in my choir setting. I love all my college kids, but when I have them in the choir setting, I can't wait to see how they do a warm-up and what they learn and how they grow. But let's talk about the ego a little bit more, because you said some great things about that in our early chat.
Yeah, it's first and foremost, we can't be successful in this field, as conductors and teachers and sort of in those leadership roles if we don't have a nice healthy ego, right?
Yes.
If you're constantly second guessing and your ego is not there at all, you're probably not going to be successful. We have to be that vanity serves us well in some instances, but like everything, it's the asset and liability. The human character, every human character trait is both asset and liability sometimes, and the liability aspect is of course what's getting us into trouble, where I mean, I'll admit it. We all have these fears of, being an imposter at times. And what if my new graduate student, or my undergrad music ed major, or my colleague who is a junior faculty member to me, or whatever, has that moment of, whether we feel threatened by it, or whether we feel like you're undermining my role as the boss or the teacher or the whatever, the person who's supposed to be the expert. Well, the reality is the more we learn, I think, the reality should be, at least, the more we learn, the more we realize we don't know anything.
I call that the Swiss cheese effect. You go to grad school and you're like, I kind of know how to do this job. And then you leave and your brain legit looks like Swiss cheese, not baby Swiss cheese, like full on Swiss cheese, because it's grown and you realize the gaps.
Absolutely. And figuring out, okay, I do have holes where I need to get better. Or I thought the other reality that I think a lot of us face, and it's sometimes scary to admit, is we thought we knew a ton about that subject. We weren't aware of the holes that we had. I think there's some areas where we all know, okay, I am really missing in this, this tidbit on, whatever. I mean, it can be super nerdy, like, I really don't know
French
much.
diction.
French diction, right?
Or
Baroque articulation, whatever it is that you feel like, oh, I wish I, kind of knew a bit more about this. But other times where you think, oh, I feel like my knowledge of vocal health and vocal technique is fantastic and so on point. And then you've got somebody from a different part of the country. I have a new graduate student from this fall who joined us from Texas, and they moved here from a great program, University of Houston undergrad, to San Jose State. And I'm so thrilled that they've joined SJSU as a master's student. And, just Texas does things differently than almost everywhere else in the country. And it's amazing. And the singers in Texas, just, I feel like they've eaten their Wheaties and really know how to sing.
Yes.
They're amazing. And so we can learn a lot, I think, from one another. And, JB brings a ton of awesome stuff that I thought, oh, wow, okay, let me, take a few notes on that. And I feel like that with pretty much all of my grad students and my undergrads a lot. And getting to a place of comfort where, and I'll be honest, I'm not always, it's a journey, right? Some days it feels great to be learning from your students, and other days it feels like, oh God, I'm supposed to be the person who's teaching them. Right. And I think that aspect of our job is so exciting, and also can be overwhelming. And so figuring out strategies to mitigate the ego a bit, not make it go away, but just sort of say, okay, I'm still good at what I do. I can still be a well-respected member of this field, and admit that I don't know everything, because none of us does, right?
That admission is like this first step. So maybe someone listening now is on the, oh wait, I should probably check my ego side. We've covered that. What about the people listening that are in these situations? Let's say the assistant to an executive, or the assistant to an artistic director, or second in command, and there's not a collaborative spirit, or there isn't real collaboration happening. What are some steps to A, be okay with that? B, make collaboration possible without stepping on toes? Or when do you know when to cut ship if collaboration isn't possible and yet it's part of your DNA?
Yeah, I hope I have some ideas to throw in there, but I think this is a question that I think many people, all of us, kind of struggle with to some extent, because, so I'm the DCA, but I still have to report to the director of the School of Music, right? And then he still has to report to our fabulous dean, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think one of the first things that all of us who are sort of trying to teach the leaders above us, if you will, how to collaborate is doing it in a way that's respectful and non-threatening, because I think that there is sometimes that initial reaction. I've caught myself doing it, that initial reaction of like tamping down on, like dissent, if you will. And so figuring out a way to, number one, do it respectfully, and number two, do it in a private way first. I think we all feel, if I'm being questioned publicly, I might, overreact. And so I think my advice to anybody who's got maybe a boss or a fellow collaborator who, I'll use scare quotes, a fellow collaborator who doesn't feel like they're collaborating and they're just sort of voluntelling how things are going to go. Sitting them down and having communication is my number one always in any relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or with your child or with your parent or a colleague at work or your boss or your students, right? I think there's a George Bernard Shaw quote that I love, something about the biggest problem with communication is the falsehood that it ever happened in the first place. Right. That we think we've communicated something, and the reality is that the person we communicated it to didn't really truly hear us. And so, setting a meeting where you actually can sit down with this person in private and say like, hey, and using those I statements that many of us have learned, that they don't feel like they're being attacked, and that you just say, hey, I'm having a sort of some feelings of not feeling like I'm a true part of this team. And I have some needs that I would love to see as a part of our discussion. And I realize that, this is an organization that maybe I'm new to and you've been around for a while, or whatever the situation is. But I would love to have conversations that are going to maybe not change anything this semester or this, concert season, but can move us in a direction that, where I feel like I'm getting to help make some decisions. And I think really framing it in like I don't feel necessary in this organization, as opposed to you don't make me feel like my voice is heard is a first start. And, and that communication side of things is really critical. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the person is going to hear it or is ready to hear it, but maybe they'll sleep on it. And over the course of a few months, they'll start to realize, with a little bit of gentle nagging, like, okay, yeah, maybe I do need to do better about hearing this person's concerns.
I think those are such great tips. The clearly articulating what it is you're feeling, taking the time to set the meeting, to not do it in a public way, to remain positive, because ultimately, if you're the one thinking this, you're the collaborator heart. So your heart is in it. You just have to get to where you're combining it. I think there's so much to talk about when it comes to collaboration and collegiality. And I always give the guests on the show an opportunity to say one thing that really matters that you want every single listener to talk to. Now, I know you're going to be back on the show eventually, so you don't have to give it all away now. But if they really walked away with one nugget from today's conversation, what would you want them to remember?
Yeah, I think I thought about this a little bit ahead of time, because you kind of said you were going to ask this question at the end. And I think I want to end with a Maya Angelou quote, because I think the idea of collaboration is all about making everybody feel like they are a part of something greater than themselves, right? And that everybody can feel like they're truly a part of something hopefully amazing, right? Or at the very least, that they're a part of this thing that is larger than themselves. And I think you said, Emmy, that, we certainly sometimes can just go ahead and make the decision on our own and move forward and be the leader that just makes the decision and just goes. But if nobody comes with us, what's the fun in that? I think we're on this planet to do better and to learn from each other and truly to collaborate. And Maya Angelou's quote is people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I know that's a little touchy-feely.
No, that is perfect.
Right? I mean, our job is not our job as musicians or teachers or conductors, but our job as people, as humans, is to remember that humanity, that we are singularly focused on making ourselves and the people around us better. I think that's our purpose. And so moving forward toward making us all better is making people feel that they're better, making people know that, like, oh, being with Emmy, I'm a better person because the conversations that we have always make me feel, and I'm going to learn stuff from her. I'm going to remember some of the things that we talk about, and I'm going to remember some of the things that we did, but I'm really going to remember that Emmy makes me feel like I'm a part of this team. And so I want to leave us with Maya.
I love it. And I'm so thankful you are part of the Music Ed Matters podcast team. It's been such a joy to talk to you this evening.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pause for a moment. How do people feel when you walk in the room? More importantly, how do people feel when you leave the room? What do you want people to feel when you leave the room? Thinking of this wonderful quote from Dr. Benson, I think this is a great thought as you go about whatever it is you're doing today or this week or this month. How do you want your students to feel? How do you want your colleagues to feel? How do you want to feel? It's time to take control of meaningful, purposeful, and wonderful collaborations. I hope that this quote in this episode has brought something into your life that makes you hopeful and excited and just a better person in general. I'm really thankful that you're listening to the show. I'm always here if you need me, emilyburch.org. Check me out on Instagram or Facebook. Give me a comment or a review on Apple Podcasts, all the things. But really, just keep listening because I exist for you. You make my life complete, and I am thankful that we are friends. On that note, remember, you, my friend, you matter, especially if you're a collaborator. You all know that music matters, and I'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.